Hello, everyone. My name is Ole Kagan, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator with LA County Library, and I welcome you to Work Ready, Careers in Fundraising. Before we get going to today's event, I'll take care of some housekeeping, do the land acknowledgement, and tell you a little bit about the Work Ready program. So if you can hear me and see the slide up on the screen, then you're good to go. However, if you're having trouble hearing me or seeing the slide on the screen, do let me know and I'll do my best to assist. If you would like to listen to this presentation on the phone, you can do that by calling 1-669-900-6833 and using the access code 832-2701-3232 and the passcode 123123. Now, you may have noticed the mics and videos for attendees of the program have been disabled, and that's so that we can all focus on our panelists for today. Now, that isn't to say that we don't welcome your contributions through questions and comments. Comments can go into the chat box. That's the one with the two speech bubbles. And questions go in the Q&A. That's the one with the single speech bubble. You want to put the questions into the Q&A because our chat moves kind of fast sometimes, and it's easy for us to miss. And I particularly want to have time to get to your questions. All right. And now it's time for our land acknowledgement. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of LA County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Kizh Nation, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at lanic.lacounty.gov. All right, and now I'd like to quickly tell you about the Work Ready program. Starting in December of 2020, the library has been lending laptops and hotspots out of 27 library locations and presenting virtual events on a range of work-related topics in order to help people get a job, improve their work situation, and plan a more sustainable career path. To see over 50 of our past events, head over to the Work and Career playlist on our YouTube channel. The Work Ready program is made possible due to funds provided by the American Rescue Plan. And I'm going to post the Work and Career playlist in the chat, so take a look at that. Share the videos that are of interest to people you know, and watch the videos that are of interest to you. And we have another great event coming up for you on Tuesday, November 5th, and that's Work Ready Career Services for deaf or hard of hearing job seekers. Join us for an information session that will offer job search advice and details concerning the robust, free career services offered by the Greater Los Angeles Agency on Deafness, or GLAD. This program is for adults, but I would also like to mention that GLAD does also offer services for teens. I'm going to post information about that in the chat, and that program is, of course, absolutely free, like all of our library programs. And if you're interested in learning more about our library programs, you can do that by going to our website at lacountylibrary.org. On the top right-hand side, click Events, and that'll take you to our full calendar, which means you'll get see events for kids, teens, adults, and older adults, both in person and virtual. Now, if you're interested in just virtual events like this one, you can hover over that events button and there'll be a little drop down, click virtual programming, and you'll get all of our Zoom events like this one, also for all ages and also absolutely free. All right, and now it's time to move into today's program, Work Ready, Careers in Fundraising. And to do that, I will begin by introducing our esteemed panelists. First, Bryn Mancuso Crane is a Chicago, Illinois transplant originally from Boston, Massachusetts. With 15 years of nonprofit fundraising, external affairs, strategic communications, and project management experience. She spent her career in the education space, working with a variety of organizations that are all ensuring in their own ways that all students receive the resources, support, and championship they deserve to achieve their biggest dreams. Since 2022, she pivoted away from working as a full-time team member at just one organization to launch her own fundraising consultancy for nonprofits, Pen to Paper Consulting. Her passion is planning and writing for missions she cares about deeply, and she geeks out at the chance to take in huge amounts of information and synthesize it into stories, pitches, strategic plans, proposals, impact, snapshots, etc., to inform, motivate, and inspire others to take action. From her years in various fundraising leadership roles, she knows how pivotal the planning and strategy behind the way we share stories and build relationships with stakeholders are. She's a graduate of Northwestern University and holds a BA in English Literature. Welcome, Bryn.
Thanks, Oleg. Proud to be here.
And our next panelist is Kim Zanti. Kim Zanti honed her writing skills writing grants in the Los Angeles arts and culture arena for small and mid-sized organizations such as Get Lit, Words Ignite, Super Collider, Indian Film Festival of Los Angeles County Arts for All Initiative, Los Angeles Arts Commission, and many others. After 2 decades in the nonprofit arena, Kim pivoted to research when she was hired on a grant from the Walt Disney Company to project manage the Next Generation Creativity Study, which developed and deployed a creativity assessment for youth. The Next Generation study took her around the country and into the UK, deploying the assessment and reporting the results from classrooms, makers clubs, and other youth learning environments, working alongside principal investigator and founder Dr. James Catterall at the Centers for Research on Creativity, or CROC, for which she would become an associate director. Kim managed multiple simultaneous studies in collaboration with client teams that included Alameda County Office of Education, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, California Arts Councils, Inner City Arts, Royal Blind School of Scotland, the Grammy Foundation, the Walt Disney Company, and the Wooden Floor. Kim holds a master's degree in creativity studies from SUNY Buffalo State College. She collaborates with organizations, agencies, and individuals on storytelling projects that contribute to a more empathetic, creative society and sustainable environment. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Oleg. So good to be here.
And our final panelist, approaching 25 years of experience in program delivery, communications, operations, and fundraising. Charles Flowers graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Vanderbilt University and received his MFA in poetry from the University of Oregon. With a proven ability to lead staff, board members, and volunteers, and a dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout his career, Charles has served in a leadership capacity at the Academy of American Poets, Lambda Literary Foundation, and Arts for Elaine, the regional arts advocacy organization. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Oleg. My video cannot be turned on. It says the host has disabled
Oh, let me fix it for you.
it. So I
Here,
tried.
I'm gonna enable it.
Okay, I could put a picture up, but
Yeah, you
it's not the
should be
same.
able to.
As I should to start your video.
Yep.
Okay, I tried. There I am. There I am.
Well,
Good, good, good. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me go ahead and remove this introduction screen so we can all be on camera here. What an esteemed panel, I've got to say. Going through the bios, I'm already impressed, and I think our audiences will be too with the conversation. So let's get started with kind of a basic question to get us all on the same page, kind of laying the groundwork for the conversation. When we talk about careers in fundraising, what do we mean by fundraising?
Hmm.
What are the options, and what are the various names for this area, for areas of this profession? Bryn, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. Well, so when I define fundraising, I think about usually the financial resources, but resources that not-for-profit or nonprofit organizations need to advance their missions, potentially grow their work, extend their services on an annual basis. Um, That's just a very quick, off the top of my head definition. But yes, this space is called a lot of different things. So, fundraising, development, external affairs, advancement. And depending on who you're talking to, those different flavors mean different things, depending on the size of the team and what the team is trying to accomplish. And happy to dive in further. But yeah, very nuanced space.
There's a lot going on. Kim, Charles, did you have anything to add to our definition of fundraising?
I think that was a pretty good overview of all the various ways to talk about it, to name it, but
Sure.
with
Yeah.
essentially the same idea of resource
And
development.
there, absolutely. And there's, it made me remember I used to volunteer at a community center, and we had a membership committee, and we were sending out letters to renew people's membership, and that was fundraising. And I had no idea I was doing fundraising. I'm in the membership committee. I'm trying to get people to join. That's all I'm doing. So it can take a lot of different shapes.
So, with that in mind, what led each of you into this career fundraising? Did you just fall into it accidentally? Um, and then, well, let's start with that because I want to know later what made it feel like it was an ideal fit for you, or was it an ideal fit for you? But let's start with what got you into fundraising. Maybe at what age did you first develop an interest, or did you first kind of get an inkling of fundraising? Kim, did you want to start?
Sure. Well, I was very young when I first started. I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. And I met a boy who had, I believe, muscular dystrophy. And I was fascinated by him. I didn't understand what was wrong with him, but something was not functioning for him. And it broke, I was a kid, I was sensitive, and I thought, what can I do? And I learned about the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And so I held a fundraiser in my backyard for Muscular Dystrophy Association. And I went to my older sister's boyfriend who worked at the local burger joint and got frozen burgers, and we cooked, he donated them and we cooked them on the grill. My neighbor friend made jewelry, and we sold her jewelry. We had games and prizes. And maybe we raised $50, maybe, but it was so fun. And it was so I felt really good about it. And that was my early start in it.
That's a lovely story.
Thank you.
Charles?
Um, that's amazing. I guess the way I got into it, I began on the program side at a nonprofit. My original career was book publishing, and I started working at a poetry organization, a nonprofit. And I was in charge of communications and promotion, and I helped with grants. That was sort of the first official thing I did with fundraising was I would, when you have a grant, you apply for money, you say, this is who we are, this is how we're going to spend the money on this. And I was helping with what we spend it on and the budgeting and things like that. And so that was sort of my first official to dipping my toe into fundraising. But I'm thinking of Kim's story of AIDS Walk or Breast Cancer Walk or all these ways that we have to participate in raising resources for different kinds of nonprofits. And I did some of that when before I was working at a nonprofit. I did some of that. So it is. I think it's all around us. There is some. I think I read something about the nonprofit economic power is like a fourth of our economy if you count all the
Yeah,
nonprofits.
philanthropy, for sure.
Yeah, it's a big part of our economy, and so it is all around us. And it's just whether or not we recognize it as such or know that that's what it's going for, something nonprofit. But I never thought I'd be raising money. I never thought I'd be, I was glad I wasn't a Girl Scout. I didn't have to sell cookies. So I was like, I never thought I'd want to be asking people for money, but I love it. I love the knowledge that you're helping someone, some organization do something. It's great. So.
And Bryn?
Well, Kim, you have me beat by a lot. I didn't even know about the nonprofit sector, let alone that you needed to fundraise to fuel it until later. My first, I'll call it formal fundraising experience was with a student theater group while I was an undergraduate. We wanted to put on one additional production in a particular academic year, and we needed to double our budget from, I think it was like $800 to $1,600 in order to do that. So I wrote a grant to the university to try to get that extra $800. And that was my first toe dip. Come graduation, I was that English major who hated creative writing. So I got into fundraising professionally through the grant writing door. It's still creative. It's still fun in that way, but it felt the mission orientation and mission focus felt really important for me. So that's a bit about how I got through the door.
Thank you. Charles, what you were saying that the fundraising is all around us. I didn't even think about it, but now that I'm thinking back. I once went on a heart walk, and you, the people that are walking are raising money, and then of course the people that are on the Heart Association side are raising money. Um, and I didn't want people to just give me money for walking because I walk all the time. So I wrote poems for people that donated.
Oh,
So it's
wonderful.
kind of random thing. But yeah, I mean, everybody, I think all of us and everybody in the audience has in some way participated in the philanthropic endeavor.
And Oleg, can I just throw in
Of
that
course.
philanthropy is another term for fundraising that's usually used from the funder point of view,
Hmm.
whether it's an individual philanthropist or a philanthropic institution. They're typically used on the funding
On the
side.
giving side, right?
Yeah. So
That's a good way to parse. Yeah, there's a lot of language here, as Bren was mentioning it earlier. And so I think when people are also looking for jobs, they're going to be considering this different departments in universities and other organizations. So what made fundraising an ideal fit for each of you? How did you know that it was the thing that you wanted to do or the enterprise that you wanted to be a part of? Kim?
well, the reason I shared that story and started when I was 10 is because I had the instinct for it. Even as a kid, I was like, I could do something about this situation. So I knew I had the instinct for it. And then, flash forward, I was in my 20s working at an art center in a Flagstaff, Arizona, which at the time was under 50,000 people. And I was wearing all the hats, as you do in a small nonprofit. And the performing arts series, the director said, you can produce that. And I said, okay. And she goes, well, that means you need to also write the grant for it through the Arizona Commission on the Arts. And it was like writing a grant to God, you were like, it was terrifying. and I spent the night under the desk because back in those days you had to make 15 copies and mail them all through the U.S. Postal Service. And it was intimidating, but I loved how I could use my writing skills. I am a writer. I love to write. I love that the same skills that go into writing a novel or writing an essay. I haven't really tried my hand so much at poetry, but word choice in poetry is key, right? And it's those skills transfer. And then so that experience, I got that grant. I didn't know if and so you get the joy of the surprise. Oh my God, we got it. It's like getting published almost. And it you kind of I kind of got like, let's do that again. Because if we get more money, then we can do this, that, and the other thing. So I always loved that feeling of you have agency. You can go find the match for the fundraising element, whether it's an individual donor or a private or a corporate foundation. And I found it exciting. And I'll just say too, the other thing I really loved about it was I could use both my leave me alone, sit at home, introvert, and write personality, and my outgoing, you should support this because it's worth every penny you have to give personality. So really allowed me to explore a lot of myself personally and professionally.
And Charles?
Sure. Yes, a combination of introvert and extrovert. I think I'm an introvert, but then maybe I'm not an introvert because I do like to talk and people and engage with people. Um, I joke now that I was an English and math double major in college, which is like such a unicorn. Who was I in 1987 to do that? But English is my first love. Reading, writing, um, always, and that's I think why I thought I was an introvert, that I was all about reading in the book and in the mind and not in the body out in the world. And math, I love problem solving. I didn't like that completely abstract stuff. It's more like, a train is moving this way and you've got three people there and whatever, all that sort of problem solving. I love that. And who knew that would be a great combination for nonprofit fundraising, because you have to tell a story. We
Right.
need money for this reason. And here's our budget. And we know what we're doing and we're not going to lose your money or do something bad with your money. That combination, I feel so lucky to have, because a lot of people don't. They turn off when you hear math or they turn off when you hear reading. And who knew? It really primed me, and I had no idea. My first career was book publishing, and from that I moved to the poetry nonprofit, and I went from the program side to the administration development side, kind of by not default, but it's more not many people like to write, and grant writing in particular, or individual appeal, that you end of year appeal to get your support for such and such a project, or to general operating. That's all a kind of persuasive writing, and it's a little bit of psychology and it's a little bit of economics, and it's really a combination that it's a learned language. I mean, I don't think everyone can do it. I think everyone could do it if they had the training to do it, but I don't think you come by it naturally. I learned by doing, basically, being edited by a fundraising consultant, or the executive director at the time, and by grants. So if you don't get the grant, you can get some feedback sometime about what would make your case stronger. So that kind of editing and development of the narrative is it's all learning. It's all learning, and you can learn anytime. So I'm not sure where I should take it from here, but yeah, I who knew I was developing into a fundraising person. But it's also I think there's some shame around money, I think, in this culture, like to need to ask for money. There's a little bit of shame, I think, culturally, and whether it's for the individual or for an organization. And so kind of recognizing that, breaking through it, realizing that's sort of I'm not sure where it comes from, but it's there, and just to navigate that and like look, oh, I would never ask for money. It's like, well, there's nothing wrong with asking for money if you believe in what the money is going toward. And so, kind of recognizing that and processing through that, I think, is something that fundraising people have to um, go through or experience a little bit.
Mhm.
So,
And then, Bryn, when did you feel like fundraising was an ideal fit for you?
Ooh, I'm trying to pinpoint a time. I think it's more of a sense that I grew up in a family where it was expected that we go to a post-secondary pathway and we have the opportunity to access that additional information and networking and knowledge. And my very first professional fundraising role was at an organization serving students who did not have a linear pathway from high school to what happened next from an educational standpoint. So I think what sustains me in this space is this really deep knowledge of my own privilege, just by dint of my identity markers, let alone what a bank account might tell you or what, a tax return might tell you. I walk around as a white woman, and that imbues me with unearned, unfair power and privilege. And I've chosen to direct it in ways that start to repair some of that. So similar to what you were saying, Charles, about there being this shame about financial circumstances and money, like I think I carry that from a like racial identity perspective, and I think that has kept me here for better or for worse. So I've sought out opportunities to learn from my colleagues of color because there's a lot there. There's so many assets, and my voice should not be the loudest ever in a room.
Thank you, Bryn. So there's a lot of themes that are emerging. The kind of the juxtaposition of introvert and extrovert in fundraising work, the idea of storytelling. There's a couple of, I want to get into those things, but there's a couple of things I want to get into first. And you kind of touched on it, Bryn, a little bit, and that is, and I think everybody touched on it a little bit, like education and preparation and skills. So, what are the kind of skills one needs to get into the kind of wider world of fundraising? So, we got like grant writing, event planning, direct donor interaction. Um, Maybe select one or kind of an amalgamation of those. And does somebody need to go to college? I mean, can skills be picked up without that? Can you speak a little bit to that, Kim?
Sure. I think that you can go both ways. You can learn by doing, as Charles mentioned earlier, which is how I learned. You can go to school now for either courses or a course of study in grant writing, fundraising, philanthropy, uh, as sort of practical strategies and ways that people um, engage in these activities. And I think it really that there's no one right way, and the setup for that's going to take you on a path that can work for you is by following whatever your passion is. So Charles talked about going from sort of general book publishing to a literary organization. Bryn talked about wanting to take her skills and enfolding them into, I mean, her privilege and enfolding that into her work. So that made meaning for them. For me, it was writing. I really loved writing and communicating and being persuasive. So and that skill is necessary, I would say, for all elements of fundraising, because you're communicating your thoughts and the thoughts of others, right? So your ability to do that, being able to write, is really a fundamental skill. having said that, in today's world, because we're so visual culture, that being a visual storyteller is also equally valuable. And so the ability to make videos, to do interviews. You mentioned, Oleg, that I was in research. And one of the wonderful aspects of that work was interviewing people and be, sort of like this, but individual or groups, focus groups. And so, the simple answer is you don't have to go to school and major and select a major, but you have to get experience. And so my thought is, if you really want to break into fundraising, find an organization that you already support or that you love what they do, you hold their mission in high esteem and value it, and see if there's an opportunity to volunteer. Because one thing that I don't think has changed in all the years I've been at this, which is more than I want to count out loud, is that there's always a need for people. There's always a need for people who have a passion and a skill set that make them really an asset to the organization that they support.
Thank you. Bryn, did you have anything to add?
I could not agree more, Kim. Finding a mission that you already care so much about um, ends up speaking for itself. Like, I don't think you can teach passion. You carry that in your heart organically. So find something that feels like you can be passionate about it for a long time. And that makes a world of difference. One skill that I would add a name, I'll call it strategically relational. So in the fundraising world, we talk a lot about leaning in and building relationships with potential supporters as opposed to being transactional, where it's a give and take, a more direct, like you give me this, I give you that. And our goal is always to be as relational as possible, bring someone along for the ride, incorporate them into the journey that your organization is on as well. And I say strategically relational because I think fundraising can look a lot like schmoozing and hanging out and enjoying the time, genuinely enjoying the time. And that's true. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of strategy and forethought into what you want a potential supporter to feel, to know, to understand in order to enable them to contribute in their most meaningful way, whatever that is. So I would couple the relationship building with the strategy that helps you plan for that journey you want to take somebody on.
You're strategically relational. Good
I've
I
never said
love
that
combination.
in
that.
my
I
I
life.
like
love
I
that.
like
I
that.
wrote that down. I love that. I would add, if I may,
Of course, yes.
part of that skill I was thinking of after the writing and then the relationship is listening, and part of that is just the strategic relationship building, because it's, you want to understand what someone is wanting to accomplish with their giving, or if they understand the mission the way you want them to understand the mission, because some people may think you do one thing and you actually do something else. And something else I wanted to add. Oh, many people, we're we are fortunate. There are so many generous people in this country, in our communities, and they want to help, and they say, I want to start a nonprofit. It's like, don't start a nonprofit. Find the nonprofit that might be doing the work that you feel needs to be done, and volunteer with them, learn about them, and then, because we don't need we'd be struck by lightning. We don't need more nonprofits. We need stronger nonprofits. And so to find, maybe there is a need that has not been here before, and we need to create something to fulfill it, or to meet it. But most likely there's a nonprofit doing some kind of work that you can really identify with and resonate, and go on that journey. As Kim says, it's like, what is the journey of the organization? What is your journey as a giver, a donor? I looked up in a moment that we had what philanthropy is, which is a Greek word, meaning comes from the Greek word philos, which is loving, and anthropos, which is humankind. So
Mm.
it comes from loving humankind. It's the act of giving money, time, or talent to help improve the lives of others.
It's
Thank you,
wonderful.
AI. Thank you, AI. Thank you. I just got that. So.
That's really delightful. Loving all of humankind. That's fantastic. So
Oh, can I add something to the end of this?
yes,
Sorry, I don't know where
no,
time.
absolutely.
Um, to the point about the nonprofits and starting in a nonprofit, you care about their mission. I also would encourage starting with a small one, because if you don't know exactly what you're interested in, but you're generally interested in fundraising, theoretically, and you want to dip your toes in, I love that phrase. Um, Chances are you'd get an opportunity in a small nonprofit to test the waters in many different ponds. So you might be able to cultivate an individual donor. You might be able to write a grant. You might be able to help organize a fundraising event. You might be put in charge of a fundraising event. And then you learn all the challenges and the obstacles and the problem solving that you have to do, and the joy and the fun of it when you see it come together. So that is strategic, and it's a way to just see the reality of the field at a level that gives you a chance to really put your hands in it.
The one thing about the idea of getting some experience in a small nonprofit or just another nonprofit, don't start your own, look for one, is something that I read in a book about nonprofit leadership, yep, like beginning of this year, late last year, is that there are nonprofits about everything. There are nonprofits on all sides of the political spectrum, uh, helping all different kinds of people to do all kinds of different things. So if there is something that you're passionate about, somebody has started an organization to try to make the world that. So uh, go ahead, Charles.
Just one more
Yeah.
footnote to that. I'm realizing that there are decades of institutional racism and neglect in certain
Mhm,
communities, and that nonprofits weren't serving certain communities, and
mhm,
those communities did need to create. I'm thinking of HIV and gay men, and it's sort of there was a need that wasn't being addressed, and
mhm,
people did need to create their own nonprofit. So I don't mean to be dismissive that there
mhm,
is don't start a nonprofit, but if there's a need that's not being addressed, that is being overlooked, neglected,
mhm.
shunned for whatever reason, yes, start something. And there are so many resources now for people on how to start things and how to build coalitions and how to build support. But initially, most of what I've heard from donors is what they're giving is like, oh, I know 3 organizations you might be interested in doing that. But there is historically and will be, I'm sure, for now, um, neglect in the communities as well, and not to be afraid
Mhm.
to tackle that because you will find strength and resources.
So I think the idea is to, before starting your own, look around first. And if you don't see something that's represented, then
Right.
move ahead fast and hard. So
Right.
I know that it's impolite to talk about things like religion, politics, and money, but the last of these is pertinent to this conversation, not just because fundraising is about raising funds, but also it's about living life. We all need to sustain ourselves. And so I wanted to ask the question, what is the kind of the pay range for careers in fundraising? Bryn, would you like to start?
Sure. I'll just be really transparent. My very first job offer at a small nonprofit in 2009, I think, was $35,000 a year. For I think we were raising maybe $400,000 that year. And I was a development manager, which just organizations have different titles for different types of roles that you're playing. Kim, this was a role where I was definitely wearing a lot of different hats. I was IT specialist, which is hysterical, all the way to primary grant writer. Um, but it lets you get your feet wet when your role is not super, super well defined, even in its title. Um, And from there, I mean, depending on the level of leadership, the number of team members you might be coaching and supporting, the number of dollars your team or you individually might be bringing in, I've seen, senior level positions be well into the six figures. So it really ranges. I think it's also geographically dependent.
Yeah,
So if you are in a big city like LA, I'm in Chicago, you'll see slightly different scales. But I think this is not necessarily unique to fundraising jobs. I think the nonprofit sector is trying to become more transparent with compensation packages, even in a basic job description. So um, always encourage people to push for that information because you have to sustain yourself and your family as well. If it's not written there for you, seek it out.
good.
Kim, Charles, did you have anything to add to Bryn's answer?
Well, I have always in sort of my fundraising was part of a larger job. So the grant writing especially, but events and individual donor management. I never took it to the point where that was my job specifically, except for grant writing, because I did that as a freelancer for many years. And so I'll talk just very briefly about having it as part of a larger job. The job titles that I held that included a large part of it as fundraising was executive director, managing director, um, uh, program manager, and and then I was the performing arts coordinator, that first job where I wrote the first grant. And so I ran the program and I raised the money to do the program. So there was quite a mix there. But then doing freelance grant writing, I just got to the point, not like literally just, but I got to the point where I started scaling my fees based on the size of the organization's budget and how much work I thought I could handle. Because one thing about being a freelance grant writer is you want your clients to feel like they're your only client, which means they need attention. And so my goal was always to have one anchor client, like a county or a municipality or a larger organization, and then a couple smaller ones. So I could balance the amount of attention I could give. Um, so that's just me speaking from personal experience. I think there is a myriad of ways you can go about getting into the fundraising field. If you're in LA, and I imagine there are similar organizations in Chicago, but in LA, there's the Center for Nonprofit Management and the Center for Cultural Innovation. The first one, the Center for Nonprofit Management, publishes a compendium of the field of nonprofit in the nonprofit world across disciplines, across sectors, and gives salary ranges for various types of work in that sector and at that level. And I highly recommend looking at that to see what the current going rates are. And then the Center for Cultural Innovation, if you're an artist or writer seeking a grant for yourself, or to raise money, like a GoFundMe, like how to do a GoFundMe, that's a whole nother world of fundraising. The Center for Cultural Innovation is geared towards the individual. So the individual creative. So, those are a couple resources to look into and to see what's possible. And I do, as Brim was saying, transparency in a job description, if it's not there, it is completely acceptable and important to ask the questions that help you understand what the compensation is.
What's the range of salary and what are the benefits?
Exactly.
All of
And
it.
about half the job listings that I'm seeing now are listing some sort of range, which is more than it used to be. I think there was a lot of um, a movement or trend toward being more transparent and what is the range, because the titles can kind of fluctuate. You know, where the manager gets this and the coordinator gets this and da, da, da. So it's rare to find someone completely transparent, but it is, I think, absolutely important to ask. And most of the jobs that I've been seeing um, are in my first real development job. I guess I was getting 50,000 a year, and it was a mid-sized nonprofit. And but the kind of mid-level that I've seen has gone from like 50 to 80, sort of, and then it can go much higher. Again, it depends on responsibility if you're supervising people, and how large the organization is. Kim's shared with me that sort of this a matrix of, if the nonprofit is this size, this is generally what I charge, and mid-size, and that's so helpful. I never thought of that. Duh, it makes so much sense.
It only took me 30 years.
Like, because a large nonprofit could have 10 people working in development and fundraising,
Mhm.
whereas a small nonprofit, it's the executive director's time, part of their time, and maybe one other person doing events and everything. And it can be a lot of hats, event hat, grant hat, everything kind of hat. And it's hard because you want to help. That's what That's what I'm here for, is to help. But I need to make a living as well. So I have, there was something else I was going to share. There is some misconception around grants, like do I get a percentage of the grant that I write, that if it's successful, and that's really not the professional way to do it. I'm sure that that's more of an advertising model or a sponsorship model, I think. But for grants, rarely is there any sort of general operating or fundraising staff cost built into that grant writing. Rarely. It does happen, but it's rare. So it's not that kind of profit incentive, like I'm going to sell more grants and get more money. It's not that. It's a different kind of mindset. But people often wonder if I get a cut of the grant. It's like, no, I do not get a cut of the grant. And Yeah, I don't know. It's just be, again, back to the topic of shame. There's no shame in asking for money. There's no shame in asking for what you deserve to do the work that you do. And That doesn't say people won't try to shame you or silence you, but that is nothing wrong with that. And it's completely respectful and professional to be upfront about it. The whole thing is to remove stigma around my money. Like there's a lot of stigma. It's like, but sorry, to know that two grant writers, one woman, one black man, if they're not making the same amount for the same job, same thing, then that's not right. And so we do need some transparency. We do need to know accountability in terms of making sure that the salaries are equitable as to the degree that they can be. And so there is a need for transparency, but at the same time, you're like, they're not going to put like salaries on the name tags or anything like that. a little bit much, but just be honest and transparent as much as you can, I think.
So we've had a question in the Q&A that I find really interesting. I'm curious about the answer as well. And if you of our panelists here have had this experience of wearing multiple hats, I think all of our panelists really, I say a few, all three of our panelists have had experience of wearing many hats um, in organizations. So how do you deal with a situation where you come into a job and all of a sudden you're the IT person and the grant writer and the administrator, this manager of staff, and also donor operations? How do you deal with that?
Well,
Go ahead, Kim.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So that was at the beginning of my career that I worked at a regional arts center, which was multicultural, and had performing, literary, visual, and just festival arts. It was very, very active. We had a theater and a gift shop and a 4,000 square foot gallery and all kinds of programming. And I am a Virgo, so I make lists, and that has stayed with me my entire career. where I would take large legal pads and block them off and say, in this box, we have to accomplish this. And down here, we have to accomplish this. And it really helped me compartmentalize so that I could multi-track. And I know that's not necessarily considered good practice for healthy brain functioning, but my brain was very fluid and flexible at the time. And it liked to be challenged. I liked the challenge of it. And so I would say that the skills required when you find out, first off, you have to be willing to say, I'll wear that hat. And I never said no. I was like, I'll do that. Well, I'll do that. Well, yeah, I want to do that too. And it turned out I could. So I learned about myself and, um, but I just want to say too, I learned about myself, but I also learned that if one person is wearing all those hats, if one person gets sick or breaks a leg or can't get to work because whatever happened, then all of that functioning, right. So I also built into my work ethic, I'm going to do this job and set it up for the person that comes after me. And I have done that my whole life. And some places don't like that mentality because people are threatened by it. They feel like, well, I'm going to teach someone how to do my job, so I lose it. No, that's not it. It's that it helps you break out jobs so that if, it's a little bit of a tangent, what I just said, but the idea is to set it up so that if it was a discrete job, an individual job, that it has shape to it, that it could be broken out as one job. And I think that's really important because we can get all up in our own self-importance if we're wearing all those hats and doing well at it. My way of sort of bringing the temperature of that down was to say, okay, what happens if we need 3 people to do the jobs? Let's make job descriptions. Let's look at their functions and how they interact and complement and pardon me, are different from each other. So it's a balancing act of time management, of level-headedness, of strong work ethic, and again, back to the passion because it's demanding work, and the passion is like the glue. It's not the glue, the fuel that really keeps you going. So
The organization's succession planning is important because even when you're gone, the mission of the organization continues.
yeah, and I always kept lists. Someone just I read I like lists. I use lists still. All those work habits that you set up, whether you're at the beginning or the middle or transitioning in your career or thinking about new work, making lists is a great way to keep yourself organized. And then I saved lists for years. I don't anymore. I had this vision that I would wallpaper a room with lists, but I don't do that
It
anymore.
sounds stressful.
No, that was some sort of Virgo fantasy, like lists.
I have a fellow Virgo here. I feel like I need to jump in. September 4th. Um, uh, the yes, equally important is the ability to learn to say no, because I've had a job that became 3 jobs. And where people left and we changed, we did the thing, and it's so I was doing development and communications and operations. I'd taken things off the ED when we changed ED's things. So because I was interim managing whatever. So learning yourself to say no is also an important thing, and to set some kind of limits. And no salary increase for that added responsibility. So that was a bad thing on my. Eventually, I got a little adjustment, but it's really hard because you're passionate about the work and you want it to succeed. And that thing about if I don't want the kind of job where if I forget to pay the insurance payment that we're all suddenly uninsured. I don't want that kind of job. I'm the only person when I have to do that and figure out if we have enough drinks for an event or we have enough this for that. And I don't want that kind of job where I have all those details dependent on one person because, as you say, I'm human. I get sick. I forget things, and it's really bad to have it. So clarity of job description. How do we do that event? What do we do? How do we do that event? Have a kind of planning guide for that event. So whoever's next, interns are great to like pass things off. And if it's taking up 50% of my time, then that's probably a job unto itself. You know, it's probably something that could be developed into a full-time job. Uh, and then that wasn't my original job. So it's sort of, I've learned that was a, yeah, learning. The quicker you learn to say no, the longer it will take you to get to burnout, I think. Something like that. If you can learn how to break yourself along the way and sort of, okay, if I keep going this way, this is not sustainable. And that, because I've been the executive director of a one-person organization. So it sounded great, but I didn't clean the bathroom. We didn't have, we don't do that. But I emptied the trash. I did this, and it's too much for one person. And obviously, this applies for smaller nonprofits because larger ones will have hopefully more than one person working for them, and we'll be able to delegate some certain things. But finding out what your strengths are, like maybe I'm not the best person to be doing this job, dealing with a vendor or coordinating a mail drop or something that maybe my time should be spent something else. I don't know, strategically allocating my talents and another person's talents and figuring out what all adds up to success. But it's tricky. It is tricky, and but you just have to be if you want to stay working for that organization and for that particular mission, then you have to take care of yourself. And self-care gets a bad rap, I know, but it's true. It's important. I mean, I'm completely politically correct and anti-politically correct at the same time. Sometimes, like, self-care is so important, but it's so easy to make fun of. Or I'm going to take a self-care day. Like, well, no, I need it, or I'm not going to come in tomorrow. So it happens. I'm rambling. Sorry.
Yeah. As a Libra, I know that we each can't scale up because then we fall out of balance. The dad joke portion of this presentation is over.
Bran, you have to sell us your sign now.
I am on the cusp of Leo and Cancer, so I'm technically a Leo. And I'll simply add, like, no mission will benefit from a burnt out version of ourselves. And unfortunately, at least the way we have it set up here in the United States, I don't see the size and scale of the challenges that we're all trying to collectively address is so huge that we need to be able to stick around for a long time. And fundraising isn't going away, philanthropy is not going away. So, to the extent that any of this sounds interesting, there's some strange job security in that. Like, this is a necessary function for this nonprofit sector. So, I could not agree more with please take care of yourselves. Please reach out for support, even volunteer support. You might not have a full-time team member working right next door to you. I have my dog. She's not helpful. But reach out and connect. It's really important.
So I had a question. I mean, kind of in the same line of reasoning. I mean, you might come into a place where you have to do a lot of different things that you have never done before. Um, there's a question that was asked before. It was questioned to Bryn, but actually I want to throw it to everybody. In order not to feel like begging for money, what mindset should we have to exude confidence in the face of like imposter syndrome? And I'm not just when it comes to asking for money, but just in general. How do you exude confidence when writing a grant, planning an event, working with donors directly?
That's such a good question. I think the start of my answer came from the reading of a book called The Generosity Network, where the core belief that you walk into any fundraising conversation with is that anyone is looking for a way to make meaning of their own life and to confer value on something that's not themselves. people just need to be asked and then shown one particular way to make that meaning, make that value, or confer that value. So walking into a room of whoever I'm talking to, and blanket assumption, they want to be involved in some way. They might not know it yet, but I get to invite them into the way that I see as really valuable right now is exciting. Um, and then I think the other piece of that is, what's the worst that could happen? They tell you no. Okay, I can weather no better than if I never asked and never found out. So that sort of helps me at least build my confidence. And then I can run back into my introvert corner and like rehash everything and talk it through with a family member or a friend and say, was I wrong to try XYZ? But then on to the next thing, right? You'll always have another conversation, another request that you're hoping to make. So there's another chance to practice it.
So
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, please, Kim, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that I think um, part of my mindset to dispel that feeling about the money is, similar to thinking about the person who's going to have the job after you, is to think about what it is that money is going to fund. So your emphasis in the conversation or in the grant or in the event is about what the funds are going to be used for. So then you're not landing on that. It's not like a telethon where you're, five more dollars. For what? For why? What's the reason? I think that helps people understand how they're plugging in and how they're making a difference, especially when money is what they have to give. And so it makes them feel like their money has meaning. It's just not about money. So,
Yes. And I think part of it is also um, this is really difficult for a small nonprofit, uh, and not to take it personally. When I was executive director of a small nonprofit, um, I was that organization. I was the face of it. I did everything behind the scenes, everything. And so if I got a no, if I got a not no, that really hurt. That really hurt because you're putting everything into your organization, and this person doesn't believe you or is not convinced, but you don't know what their priorities are. If you don't have the time to get to know them and talk and say what are their priorities. One organization I worked for, I did some major donor training with. They said we don't expect to be the number one charity in their portfolio. We want to be in the top three. We want to be in the top three. We don't, you don't expect to be number one or their favorite charity or their favorite nonprofit. But if you can get up in the higher, just a handful, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And again, not to take it personally, even though it feels personal. I think money feels personal a lot of times. And again, if you're doing the work and you're asking for the money for the work and all of that, it can be tough. When I was working for one organization, we're doing individual giving, and major donor giving, and it would be like a development person and a program person. So the program person could kind of talk about where the money would benefit the organization, or if they were already a donor, like what were we able to accomplish in the last year. It's also important to communicate to people, to donors, multiple times a year without asking for money, so they don't think the first time you call them they're going to be, oh, he wants that gift. It's like, no, it could be a development and some program or a case, or it was a legal organization. It's like you don't want to associate yourself with just asking for money, but giving good news about the nonprofit, giving good news about successes, growth. Oh, the ED is this private, the ED is transitioning and stepping down. We're going to start a new search. And so the highest donors know that ahead of time. They don't read that in the paper. Remember papers we had? That kind of strategic thinking around it is just but try not to take it personally. It's so hard. That's especially hard for us overcompensating Virgos, but it's true. It's true. we take most things personally, especially if you are that nonprofit. You're the one person doing it,
Hmm.
and it's just it's hard. But just it's because as Brent says, there are more people, there are more donors, and you don't keep having to go back to an empty well. You can find a well that has water in it for you. So
Speaking of being the only person who had a question that I wanted to read, it's a little bit of a long question, but I think it could be an interesting catalyst to a conversation here. So the question is, I'm wondering how the panelists feel about this. I've always thought that the most fundraising was basically individual fundraising. There are, of course, wealthy individuals, but even within institutions, decisions are made by individual people. For example, with our organization, we had never gotten a certain local government grant. I scheduled a meeting with the programs officer and impressed upon them the value and the importance of our program. The next grant cycle and every cycle after, we started getting those grants. Same applies to foundation and corporate fundraising. So it's an interesting, interesting kind of fine point when it comes to all of the various aspects of fundraising, the individual aspect of it. So can our panel speak to that?
That's
Great.
such an interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
No,
Kim.
Brent, you take that one on.
I'll try. I'll start. That is such an interesting point. I think in the foundation world and in the corporate giving world, what can feel really tricky is that many have publicly stated priorities, funding areas, giving guidelines. They have a mandate to give in certain areas to make an impact in a variety of ways. Um, and that feels sort of separate from the individuals at a foundation or at a company. But at the end of the day, people give to people.
Mhm.
And so part of the foundation and corporate giving spaces is sort of mapping out and navigating the decision makers, the people behind the scenes. So, as an example, at a foundation, you may be speaking with a program officer, a program director. There are a variety of titles on the philanthropic side of things as well. But that program officer, that program director, likely will not be the sole decider on the grant submission you make or the request that you've further along. They'll take it to a board or they'll take it to a family of trustees. They'll take it to a corporate entity, they, the all powerful they, and they need to be queued up to essentially advocate for you in a room that you may not have access to or that your organization might not have direct access to. So, part of the strategy building behind the scenes that you're doing is navigating the many people who may be involved in a funding decision that you're trying to advance. Um, and it's fun and it's tricky, and Google is a great free resource. And asking who else needs to know about this is a question I always end a meeting with, because people will get their wheels turning even if they don't have an answer for you right in that moment. They may be able to help you navigate to a door that is currently closed and help you crack it open a little bit the next time.
So I wanted to ask, and we had a few questions about this in the chat, about developing the skills for getting into fundraising. So we had a few people ask, is it important, for instance, to get an MFA in arts management? Are there classes that you would recommend, or that are classes a good idea? Um, is there a certificate? Is our certificates program useful when it comes to both picking up the skills and also having it on your resume? Do nonprofits look at the possession of a certificate in fundraising or nonprofit management, or
mm.
et cetera, positively when hiring? So that's a lot of questions, but that's generally kind of, are all these things useful?
May I jump in? I
Of course, yeah.
because I am one area of fundraising that I'm not that knowledgeable in is planned giving. When you leave an asset in your will or some sort of thing to the nonprofit. And I know generally how it works, but I don't have a great depth in it. So I've been thinking of taking a course in it, because you can find courses in planned giving or major donors or event planning. There are these kind of classes you can find either from local fundraising professional networks, which do exist. All the fundraisers get together and talk about best practices or worst practices. So that I think is good. When I was coming up, there wasn't those sort of majors or minors in nonprofit management. And it doesn't have to be arts specifically. It can be just nonprofit management. And that's can be everything from budgeting and reporting and reading nonprofit tax forms, the 990 and all of that. There's all kinds of things you can learn theoretically in the classroom, and then get internships or volunteer, and you find ways of doing it. So I don't think it hurts at all. It's not necessarily, it's good to know that you have that knowledge, might get you in the door for an interview. And then of course it's a person to person, as Bren was talking. It's like people give to people from the beginning. It's about that. And it's, I think it's an asset, but don't go into debt for it. So many people go into a debt for graduate degrees and stuff that may not be. I've thought about getting an MBA in nonprofit management. It's like, but I've done the work. I'm like, why do I want to get an MBA in it? I could. I mean, yeah, it would look impressive, but do I want to spend the money and the time doing that when I kind of got it by working 20 years in the field? So I don't know. It's a trick, but it can't hurt, but I wouldn't go into debt for it. That's my thing for it.
Yeah, I would say I would echo that I think you can go to school. I think there are programs now, maybe not lots, but there are many that you can get an undergraduate degree, you can get an associate's degree, you can get a certificate, and even going up to the graduate level, maybe not in fundraising specific, but nonprofit management, that kind of thing. I think it depends on your goals and how much longevity you think you'll have in the arena of fundraising, and how much you have thrived as a student in the past. If you haven't, if you didn't like school, I wouldn't go to school. I'd go to work and start somewhere that you feel passionate about, and see what kind of volunteer opportunities are available, or get your foot in the door opportunities such as an internship, and start there. I think the biggest thing about these worlds, and we've kind of talked about that throughout, is that there's a lot of different vocabulary and there's a lot of different ways to speak about things. And so the more you are around that and the more you're looking at grant opportunities, I mean, you have, I think Charles said Google is your friend. You can ask any question and come up with answers that are important to your search. And I'll also just point out that I just went through a hiring process for a mid-level specialist position. And we were requiring very specific knowledge or equivalent experience. And so we got a whole host of resumes, and we looked at everything: education, experience. Some people had what looked like ideal mix of education and experience. When we talked to them, they were not really that keyed into what we were looking for. So, it's like, okay, well, on paper, they sound great. But in reality, in real life, in 3D, they were good. That was important, but it wasn't enough to make us go to the next level with them and schedule an in-person interview. So I think you have to really look at yourself. Are you a student? Will you thrive? Will that take you to your next level of understanding, or will it just be something you're doing because you think you have to? And if that's your
Or to
reason,
put off
yeah,
taking a
don't do it.
risk.
Yeah, exactly. Take a risk, jump in, go to work. And I think we've also talked about in this panel that you really have to identify your strengths and your weaknesses and be honest with yourself about that. And also, what do you like to do? What don't you like to do? I like to write. So grant writing for me was a natural fit. Um, I had a harder time with events because I was not so much of a people person, but I got over that by doing it, you know. And so, yeah, I think you really have to look inward and don't worry about what the world says, and you'll get a more of a true north uh, compass.
Mhm. I would be remiss if I didn't say that the library has grant writing courses available for free
There you
for
go.
the public, and I will post information about that and all of the other links mentioned and the organizations mentioned during this panel in the follow-up email. So if you missed it or if you're friendly writing it down, you don't need to. I got you. I did want to get a little bit into, we've been kind of talking, we've gotten some details, we've talked about generally. I wanted to know what an average day for you looks like, just so people can understand, if you're going to get into it, what's it look like? So Bryn, what's an average day in your life?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the easiest way to answer that from my perspective is there is no average day. So if you like the thrill of the excitement and the variety, this could be for you. Um, I'm also, though, speaking from the perspective of being a fundraising consultant. So I work with a variety of organizations at any one time. I'm not just in one organizational context. And each of my partner organizations are aware that I work with other organizations, but don't necessarily know which ones are which. So they don't know that tomorrow is such and such organization's gala and they're
Mm,
going, along their merry way and saying, we've got this grant deadline. What are we going to do about it? So that adds a lot of potential chaos, but it's an opportunity to flex organizational muscles, the no, not right now muscle, and just getting really clear with myself about my capacity. I'll also add from the consulting world perspective, I chose to step into that and away from a full time organizational employer to start my own family. So balancing the homework and the professional work is just a constant lack of balancing act. Um, and that's okay. Like it's all a stage and there are busy seasons at home and busy seasons in the office. Um, so it's all different every day. I could spend, the morning writing part of a proposal. I will never be able to bang out a whole proposal in a morning. Usually there's too much nuance to the responses. And then in the afternoon, when I know I'm not going to be quite as fresh, I will have a regularly scheduled check-in meeting with somebody where we're talking about next parts of a strategy where I don't have to be quite as polished and eloquent come the afternoon. So yeah, I get to think a lot about how to structure my days, and there's a lot of luckiness in that. I'm thinking back to being at a full-time organization, and there were team meeting obligations and retreats and team building, and then trying to peel off to quote do the work when really it's all the work. So yeah, the gentle imbalance of balancing it all.
Amazing.
Kim, what does your day look like?
Currently I work for Howard County in Ellicott City or in Columbia, Maryland, which is between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. And I've only been there a year, and I am on a very steep learning curve, learning the language of HUD because I'm in the housing, I'm the chief of the the Community Planning and Grants Division of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Was a lot of words. But I've had to learn the language of housing and urban development from the federal level, the county level, the state level. I spend a fair amount of time writing agreements between nonprofit agencies and Howard County, and also distributing money and verifying it's a reimbursable expense as part of the grant agreement. I work with about 35 nonprofit agencies. We are hiring, so we're hiring a home program specialist for someone who has the technical knowledge of the home partnerships program through HUD. So reading applications and developing questions for the interviews, actually recording the answers given, and then ranking the candidates. So I'll say that's and I came back here from LA because my family is here and my dad was unwell, and I saw this job and went, it's perfect. I think I could do that job. And so it's different every day, but it's also, I'm learning so much that it's evolving. And I think that it really is hard. A typical day depends also on how you structure your workflow. And everybody has a different way of doing that. Like Bryn was saying, I don't want to write a proposal at the end of the afternoon. I want to do it in the morning when I'm fresh, because it's a different skill set and it's a different demand on your brain. And so I would say that my typical day has a lot of variety in it. It uses different skills that I have. It gives me the opportunity to work solo and to work in a team. There are lots of meetings, and I don't always speak the language of the group that I'm meeting with. And, thank God for Google. So you can go, okay, what are we talking about? And you can think on your feet. So there's leadership involved, which I enjoy. And there's followership involved, which I enjoy. So I think, it's like Brim was saying, there's typical days are generally full of lots of different kinds of work activity,
So
broadly speaking.
Kim, you moved from, and you expanded our view of fundraising careers once again by your job, because you're now on the side where you're the one giving. So, or you're the one who nonprofits apply to. So
We're
that's
actually
also,
in between. Yeah. It's
so you,
it's an
yeah.
ecosystem, right? Because
Mhm.
the federal government, if you're in the arts, someone mentioned if I wanted to go into arts management, it's really helpful to understand the fundraising ecosystem of the area that you're most interested in. So in the arts in the United States, and whenever someone says we want to get rid of the NEA, it never passes the National Endowment for the Arts, because that money from the National Endowment filters down into state arts organizations. In California, it's the California Arts Council. In Maryland, it's the Maryland Association for the Arts, I believe. It depends on where you are. In Illinois, I'm sure there's an arts council. And then that money goes down into local councils. So they might be county councils, or if there is a township that has a arts organization or community cultural organization, that money comes and trickles very much like waterways into rivers and oceans. That money comes in, and if you cut it off at the source, we'll feel it around the country. So I say that because in my role in Howard County, We are what's called an entitlement district, meaning the grant is not competitive. We're always going to get the money, but it's based on factors like population and the amount of people we're serving. And it's a whole matrix of variables that determine the amount that we will get, that we then distribute to the nonprofits who apply for it. So they have to have really good rationale for why they need the money. And then they have to report on it quarterly. And then we have to take that data and report that to HUD. So it's a whole world of levers that are moved by the distribution of funding. And I think that's another key aspect of being in this world, is the ability to see the connections between all the moving parts and how one person who gives money affects the whole, or one organization that provides this particular programming. If you give your money to it, this is all the different things it can affect. So yeah, I'm in between. We give and we get, and that's a board sort of maxim: you give or you get off, for board members of organizations. But in the government, we are distributing the funds. And
Mhm.
so it's fascinating. I
Yeah.
mean, I tried it when I was younger and it wasn't for me, but it brought me back here to my family. And I was like, okay, this is good.
Yeah. And Charles, what's an average day for you?
Um, well, the return to the Virgo topic lists are always great, and anchor meetings during the week. Like I know I'm going to have a 1 hour check in with this client on this day. That kind of anchors the work for that week for that client. The best one of the best working relationships I ever had was my uh, with the development director at the ACLU when I was doing individual giving there, and she and I would meet in the morning. It's like these are our three top priorities. Then we go away, we do our work, and then we come back in the afternoon and we report back. And if anything came up during the day, which it invariably would, you shift your priorities. But it was it was a perfect combination of autonomy and teamwork because we both knew what each other were doing, but that could be interrupted if priorities shifted. But it wasn't like micromanaging or anything like that. So that's what I try and do with myself. I should be more micromanage myself, but I have the list I want to try to get accomplished, and then I see what happens, and hopefully I get it accomplished. And deadlines are, got to put those deadlines big and blue on the calendar, and not miss any of those. So but it fluctuates, and to have I'm independent consultant now. I've been in house, and I prefer in house honestly because I like people. It's a little isolating to be independent sometimes. And I have two dogs, thank God. They keep me home, focused on them sometimes. But it really varies, and I have to, as an arts advocate, return to the NEA briefly. Conversation is that the arts advocates, arts, the teams at the NEA, et cetera, the staff are very cognizant of where the funding is going, and every congressional district, all 400 and something of them, 440, I think, get an arts project. I mean, they get funded. They fund every district in the country so that that representative, whatever their political persuasion, can say, this is the benefit to my people, my constituency. They're so strategic. It is so smart. So that's part of why it has not died. So that's good.
Strategic is our word of the day.
It is, yes.
So that's actually all of the time that we have for today. Gosh, there's so much more to talk about. This conversation could be double the length and probably more. And so we may have to bring y'all
Round two.
back. Yeah.
Round two.
Round two. Yeah.
So thank you to Bryn, Kim, and Charles for providing all of this wonderful, honest, informative, deep dive into fundraising. And thank you to all the folks that are out there who were with us today and asked your questions. I know we weren't able to answer all the questions. We probably couldn't, even if we were here for 3 hours, just because there's so much to talk about. If you do have feedback for us, I have a post-event survey, and I would welcome if you spent 2 minutes to fill it out. Let us know how we could do better, what went well, and what topics you'd like us to talk about in the future, like part two of fundraising. Once again,
I
thanks to all, and we'll see you next time.